and welcome to another episode of Scions of the Southland. It is Tuesday, or no, it's Monday right now when we're recording this, so it'll be Wednesday when this goes up. I don't know. Time is stupid. It has been another busy weekend of Georgia Tech sports. As always, we have Mr. Jake Grant here to talk about it. How are you this week?
Hello. I'm good, thanks. Settled back in. School's been all right. I don't know. I can't complain. It's that February grind.
You know, you're a student. You'd think you'd find a way to complain. You quirky millennial, you.
I like to think I'm a glass half full kind of guy, particularly on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. But that's neither here nor there.
Okay, wow. Someone has friends. So cool. Anyway, all right. So we have a lot to get to as per usual. But let's get started with the usual women's basketball update. Jake, do you want to hit this one?
Sure. They played twice, both on the road, Blacksburg, Raleigh, last week. They've kind of been not fully off the bubble, but they've been on the outside looking in thanks to that 5-game losing streak they had, and didn't really do themselves a lot of favors up in Virginia Tech. But I don't really want to talk about that game because it wasn't that fun. Because it
was not that fun.
Losing, great, but we do have a really, really fun game to talk about in the NC State game that was Sunday, yesterday for Akshay and me and the present right now. But yeah, no, they had a rip-roaring time. Went up to Reynolds Coliseum, which place where we also notably had a great volleyball comeback win, where Georgia Tech. I wouldn't call it a comeback win per se this week, but no, they handled and held off the Wolfpack. So yeah, definitely a solid week for them.
Yeah. So I have the game cast of the NC State game pulled up, and if you pull this up too at home, you'll see that right at the beginning of the third quarter, about 8:09 in the third quarter, or 8:09 left in the third quarter, Tech goes up 31-30 on a Francesca Pond jumper and just explodes from there. And I watched a little bit of the game, and honestly, it would not be a huge stretch to say that a lot of that offensive explosion was because of Francesca Pond. And
for sure, 30 points.
Yeah, just to cover her stat line to end the game: 30 points, 11 to 24 shooting, 4 of 5 from the free throw line, 7 rebounds. It was a very, very effective day for her.
Yeah, I'd say so. Again, I didn't get to watch all of this, but I did go back and watch the end. We jumped out and stayed ahead kind of after that mid-second. It was solid. It was solid, but our biggest lead didn't come till late in the second, which is good. Or late in the second half, I should say. Which is good because that's something we've kind of struggled with and you've done a lot of looking into this kind of phenomenon over the years of the third quarter nap, coming out of half and
oh god, I don't even.
But we didn't really nap yesterday. Got close at the end, but you kind of expect that playing the number 4 team in the country, so not gonna hold that above their head too much, But no, they locked it down. They shot their free throws at the end, which is something that they've struggled with at least a little bit. So I don't know. It's good. It's good to see them just putting it together right. Like this is kind of how we laid out a path to seeing them succeed, and they followed through on it.
Yeah, and I do want to mention they made their free throws down the stretch. They still were sub 60% on hitting free throws for the game. They were at 53.8% compared to NC State's 77.8. And then one last note that I'm looking at that I'm seeing on the game flow diagram. It's not to say that NC State didn't pull close, and I mean you said this, that NC State made it especially close towards the very end, but also if you're looking right going into that fourth quarter, NC State pulls within pulls within 4, pulls within 6-ish, and then Tech goes off in that quarter again, and NC State actually ends up falling asleep for the majority of that for the opening part of the fourth quarter. So it seems like in this situation, the tables have actually turned for Tech. It's NC State, its opponent, that's the one that's being lulled to sleep here, whereas Tech is able to keep up that momentum, especially into the late stages of that fourth quarter, where it comes down to layups and free throws after fouls.
It's something I wish we'd see more consistently all year, but I'm not gonna fault them for putting it together against the team where a win would help them the most, you know?
Yeah. Just to go over a couple more stats to really pad the picture here. Field goal percentage overall, Tech eked out a victory there, 47% versus NC State's 45%. Tech shot better from 3 by about 12 percentage points. Tech turned the ball over slightly less, 2 fewer than NC State, and then both teams were even in rebounds. I hate to just read off of a stat sheet here, but I think a couple of these really tell the tape, especially in a close game like this. You look at that turnover margin, 2 extra turnovers is 2 extra possessions. You say a possession is like 2-ish points on average, probably like 2.2. I don't know what the metrics say. I mean, there was a 4-point margin in the game.
It comes down to doing those couple little things, right? That's why you play the game. That's why that's where any team can win on any given day, and that's something we say a lot about, like, you know, like baseball especially. But I don't know, like Georgia Tech plays an aggressive brand of defense, is big in the rebound. Like if they're going to pull it off, they're going to get those couple extra shots. And women's basketball is a game that sees a lot of turnovers. So I'm not gonna go, oh wow, look, they shot 47% from the field. Like, they also turned the ball over a decent amount more than, you know, looking at other stat lines. So it kind of balances it out. But if you can play your physical brand of basketball, you're going to put yourself in a lot of games. And with Francesca Pon, who is the anchor, is the senior, is the most experienced person on this team, clicking, it's exactly a phrase we say sarcastically a lot between the two of us and going to sports and stuff like that, is just how we wrote it up. Like, I mean that without the least bit of irony or sarcasm or
no. This is how you. If Nell Fortner is writing the story of this game, this is exactly what she's targeting. She's looking at getting the ball to her shooters, her offensive generators, and making the machine go there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And to put this back in a little bit of like the national perspective, we're back on bracket according to a College Sports Madness, which is probably my go-to. I know it's not everybody's, but they definitely keep the most regular tabs on women's basketball and bracket stuff. But no, the last state in for them this week are St. John's, who we'll talk about in baseball in a little bit. Yay. Georgia Tech, Western Kentucky, Duke, Drake, Iowa State, Creighton, and Tennessee. This is despite Georgia Tech's RPI, Akshay, currently sitting at a nice 72 in the country. So that's not awesome, but it is up 18 spots from last week, despite only going 1-1. That's what you get for beating a team that was on the number 1 line in a lot of brackets. But yeah, no. And usually a lot of these sites, kind of a disclaimer that I'll give is their first 8 out will skew towards mid-majors and low majors, and their last 8 in will skew towards major programs. But among the last 8 in, you got St. John's, which is Big East, which is major conference in basketball. And then you got Georgia Tech, Duke out of the ACC, Tennessee out of the SEC, Creighton also out of the Big East. So those are big schools. But then you also got also Iowa State, but you still got Western Kentucky and Drake in the mix. And then in their first 8 out, there's 2 Big Ten teams, North Carolina, Butler, Oklahoma State. So it's fairly balanced. I don't know. A win like this is something that'll turn a lot of heads, especially when you're a team like Georgia Tech that has come down close against quality teams like A&M earlier in the year, and
North Carolina too, Miami,
yeah.
Virginia Tech.
Yeah, Florida State was a win. We get them again. Like, that's another opportunity to get another one. Like, they're playing themselves into not relevance. That would be a wrong way to put it, but
they're playing their way back into the tournament is how I would put it.
Yeah, and if they can nab another win out of what are they called? Out of Florida State, I don't see them again win the games, play the schedule. Think we need to play Clemson again, so got to win that one. Loss there would be pretty bad.
Oh yeah,
knock on some wood right now. But yeah, no, they ended the week how I think they needed to, and I think that's if they're going to play in March, if they're going to play into April, like, better to do it in the NCAA after all the years of kind of exist on this margin that we're kind of at right now,
Mm-hmm. And just to give you an idea of what the schedule looks like the rest of the way, there are 3 games left. Thursday at number 5 Louisville, Sunday versus number 17 Florida State, and then the following Sunday at Clemson. So you gotta take it. I mean, you gotta take the Clemson game. Like, that is that you have to take that one. 2-1 has you sitting pretty heading into the ACC tournament. And from there, it's a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of how the seeding works and how many wins you're going to get there. But you take Louisville or Florida State, and then you're in very, very good position to get probably into that 60-ish range where you are firmly on the bubble, if not edging towards being the last couple of teams in.
I don't know. I think, especially if they beat Louisville, I think this team has wins that can stack up against anybody in the country. But they also have some losses that are kind of like anvils, and in a top-heavy sport, the ones at the top only really beat each other up, So,
mm-hmm. And if you look at that early season slate too, I think some of these teams are going to come back to hurt them, like playing East Tennessee State, playing Kennesaw, albeit I don't really know how Kennesaw looks right now. I mean, almost losing to Clemson. We talked about a couple of weeks ago how that Clemson win, despite being a win, also looks like a loss in terms of RPI. Like,
I mean,
some of these games are just hold the team back when you're talking about their tournament resume, and that's not any fault of their own. You schedule, you play the games that are on the schedule, et cetera, et cetera. But you really want to cement your place on in the tournament picture for the first time since 2012.
Well, yeah,
beat Louisville, beat Florida State, beat Clemson. You are probably in. I won't say definitely. I won't, again, disclaimer, we're not experts, but that should be enough.
See, I was going to go down this list here, and at first I was going to roast Kennesaw looking at the RPI because they're at 217, and that's not good. But then I kept searching because you said ETSU, and I was like, oh, they're at 285. That's pretty terrible. And then I kept scrolling. 283. Pittsburgh's at 289. And then, drum roll please, Georgia State at 309. Those are all teams that we played, beat, thank goodness. But those are not going to be helpful. Grambling is on there too. We played Grambling, beat them 89-42. That's great. You bank that win or whatever. But they're sitting at 345 in the country out of 351.
Yeah, it's not. Some of these games are just, like you said, they're anvils on the schedule. It's not just losses that hurt you. It is at a certain level the strength of your schedule. But again, yep. I think the greater point is, look, you got 3 great opportunities. Well, really 2, and then Clemson is kind of a third. 3 great opportunities at the end of the season to play yourself back into the tournament picture without needing help from the ACC conference tournament. It's do or die time.
Yeah, they need. I think they need to win. I was going to say 3 wins, but I think yeah, it'd be great if 2 of those came before. But if they're in the ACC tournament going 1-2 in these last 3 games, they need to pick up definitely 1 win, probably 2, in order to kind of be at a place where they can say, okay, like we're in the mix. Looked at Clemson really quick, by the way. They are 7-19, 4-10 at home. So they sit 218 in the country. That is a game we must win. Absolutely must win.
Yeah, and I mean we discussed previously that is also a bit of an anvil in terms of RPI, but at the same time, it's a bad team. You need to beat the bad teams.
Would have been really, really helpful to get Virginia Tech win because they're sitting at about 29 right now. But can't take that back. We play the schedule we have. We get another shot at Florida State and Louisville. So I guess a grudge match with the Elizabeths is coming up. And we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Let's move on. Women's tennis is the next thing on our docket. I have here from what you wrote in Yellow Jacket Alley that not Yellow Jacket Alley. Wow, Yellow Jacket Roundup. It is late on the West Coast today. Women's tennis at number 17 in the nation fell to Miami at a score of 5-2, and then downed Northwestern 4-2. So you want to fill in the gaps of my meager tennis knowledge here?
Yeah, we'll kind of shoot through them pretty quick. Miami has a very good singles player, actually. I was kind of surprised going back and looking at it because they don't live stream it. And it was at the same time as baseball, so you kind of got to piece together what you kind of got to piece back together what it is. Miami's not terrible. It's not like they're dropping an out of conference thing or like a team they need to beat, for example, would be Boston College, whose tennis team is terrible. Tech started themselves off strong because they did get the doubles point, but Miami took 4 singles, so the hard way around. Kenya Jones fell to the number 3 singles player in the country. No real shame in that. She beat 2 in the top 10 like last weekend, so I guess it was her turn. Vicky Flores and Gia Cohen lost to ranked opponents. Vicky Flores was a 3-set long game. Kenya Jones also took the number 3 player, Estela Perez Samariba, to 3 sets. But no, they played them all out. And I don't know. I guess what it comes down to is there are not a lot of clean wins in tennis, and there's not a lot of clean losses. If you have tuned in regularly in the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've talked a lot about how it's really easy to lose a tennis match 4-2. You can lose a couple sets by a couple points and look good or look bad. Obviously, not seeing him in person, I can't comment as much, but a stat sheet that jumps out at me as being something we need to be terribly concerned about. Like, they were in all their matches, and then obviously they followed it up with a good win up at Northwestern, who I believe is not ranked now, but we're pretty good the last time we played them, because we have played them recently somehow. Wow, that was terrible.
Very specific. Very specific. I see that you prepared very well.
We love vague non-specifics.
They're very Midwestern.
No, Northwestern, moving on from Miami, Northwestern 4-2, solid enough win. Lost the doubles point, so had to go the long way around. We almost got swept in the doubles point because Kenya Jones and Vicky Flores were down 5-6 when play was called. So not great, but they did get 4 singles points. Kenya Jones beat their only ranked. That's always good. Vicky Flores handled solidly. Gia Cohen got a win again in 3 sets. And then Court 6 has been interesting. They're trying. I think Tech's trying to figure out what to do down on the lower lines because it had been it's been something we kind of moved around so far this year. So Court 6 has been a little bit, I don't want to say shaky for us, but they're still playing around with the lineup. but Vicky Flores is actually playing better singles than Kenya Jones, and Kenya Jones has kind of been our star or our anchor, for lack of a better term, since Paige Horrigan graduated a couple of years ago. So it's kind of good to see her have help, and I think that's why we see Tech kind of taking that step back up from being, they still made the tournament last year, but like obviously being ranked is a better season so far than last year. So they're definitely taking those steps. So 1-1's not too bad.
Cool. Yeah, I have nothing to add because I am not a tennis pro. So all I can say is I am satisfied with 1-1. Disappointing to lose Miami, but I will take it. It wasn't 0-2.
True. That's kind of where I'm at too. I did learn something interesting today because I was going through it seems like we've been on a real hot streak against NC State kick as I was sitting waiting for class to start. 3 straight in football dating back to 2010. Beat them last year in baseball, 3 in a row in volleyball, 4 in a row in it was some other
tennis,
vaguely producing sports.
Basketball, women's basketball,
men's basketball.
Lol.
And then so my favorite one that I found out before last year when Georgia Tech lost to NC State 4-3 in women's tennis, their streak had dated, it was a 22-game win streak dating back to March 7th, 1998. So that was the first time in my lifetime that Georgia Tech women's tennis had lost to North Carolina State, which is a scary long streak and not something, I don't know, you don't usually see it in sports of any level, like that is Kentucky, or not, was it Tennessee, Florida? How long was that?
No, you're thinking Kentucky, Florida was 31 years.
Yeah.
Clemson at Chapel Hill in basketball, 59 years.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Just something I don't have any reason to put that in a Yellow Jacket roundup, but this is a sports podcast where we talk about random stuff that tangentially relates to Georgia Tech. So there you go. There's your historian left turn before we go into what's next.
Let's go to track.
Cool. This one's really short. Do you know what it is?
Yes, I can cover it because I have my tabs open. So Nicole Fegans breaks another school record, taking down the 3,000 meter indoor record. That is an 18-year record. I don't know what exactly the times were because Jake did not list them in his article. So if you want to know, I'm sure they're on ramblinrec.com. Other than that, in here we have Olivia Moore getting herself a medal at Clemson in the long jump. 3 of our male runners, finished 6th, 7th, and 8th in the mile at Nashville. And then Bria Matthews was back in action in the triple jump in Clemson. To piece all of that together, to sum it all up, Tech was in 3 cities at the same time. Did reasonably well, I would say, especially with the record breaking from Nicole Fegans. And now they get to rest up before the ACC Indoor Championships.
I'll throw out the record time, 9:16:88, which is about just a hair more than 6 seconds faster than the previous record, which was 18 years old. But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. I mentioned last week that it was refreshing and nice to see that Tech had placed in a meet, because they got second in College Station last weekend. When you do indoor track long enough, it gets kind of hard to follow because they go, they're out in Ames, they're in Clemson, they're in Nashville. There's a lot of stuff going on. And you go whoa, they're not really taking any of these meets, But that's kind of why you got to take not the overall place with a grain of salt, but you got to go, Fegan's running really well is clearly a great theme that they've built throughout the year. If you noticed a couple weeks ago, the distance medley had, I think it was podium. Yeah, both teams podiumed in the same meet. That's another got to look at. Oh, Bria Matthews coming back to do the triple jump. She went to NCAA's, I believe, twice last year because they got indoor and outdoor. Either way, it's about piecing together the narrative, and even more so than, like a tennis match that you didn't get to see in person. It's about trying to, it's a little bit hard to divine some of this stuff.
They're all individual performances, so
Yeah.
like in terms of comparing and evaluating, it makes like you're saying, it makes it a little bit different to evaluate how the team is as a whole, because track, like swimming, it's very individualized, and it's almost circumstantial in some places, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Because and it's the same reason that, like, going back to women's tennis, tinkering with whoever's on their lineup, especially on court 6, like, that's interesting because, when you only have to get those 4 points and you're pretty confident in the top half of your lineup, you can do things like, throw so-and-so out there. I want to see how she plays against this, or, and golf's the same way. You have this flexibility that maybe you don't have in volleyball, where you're fighting until you get that 25th point of the third or fourth, until it's kind of like the sporting equivalent of tossing out like Trace Gonzalez in the bottom of the 8th to take an at bat when you're up 6-0 against St. Peter's. It's tinkering in a way that can provide benefits later, and in track especially, like, you kind of got to take the number with as much weight as you can put on it. Like that 6-second drop is gonna be more significant than, she got 4th overall.
Let's move on to let's talk about softball and then baseball real quick, and then we'll move on to a couple of our other interesting items.
Men's basketball, maybe.
God. Let's talk about softball real fast. They went 2-2 in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. They picked up a game versus Nebraska and Iowa, and then also dropped a game to each of those respectively. I think in your recap you said this really should have been 3-1, but they let the first Nebraska game slip away. And there was also, I noticed this while watching it this weekend, there was a lot of weirdness around illegal pitches. Also, and in a couple of the other softball games that I was watching around the nation, there was also a renewed emphasis on keeping batters' feet in the batter's box, which those two things are very unique to softball. And it, as someone that comes from a majority baseball background, it seems very overly legislated, in my opinion. So,
yeah, I will totally agree with you on that. I had the helpful benefit of having my sister, who is currently being recruited for playing NCAA softball, in attendance at the game with me. Shout out Maddie. But no, it's kind of funny because we come from a very, very, very strongly baseball background, if you will. And it was funny to kind of hear her thoughts on that, because I don't know, like, there's so much intricacy in the softball pitch, and just like there is in baseball, like, we can talk circle change or, slurve, whatever. Pitching is a weird kind of mechanism wherever you're at. If you look at them lowering the mound in the late 60s, like, there's always been weird rules about it. But basically in softball, there's no mound, right? Because it's all dirt infield, but they do draw a circle around the rubber, and there's 2 lines that connect the rubber to the circle. And basically the short version is you got to stay within the lines with your drag foot on the ground. And I think something that especially the Nebraska pitcher was dealing with a lot was that she was lifting her foot way up, and they're like, my sister derisively called it the hop. So I think that plays a lot into it, and it kind of makes sense. Like if you're leaping up, then you're gonna be able to put more power on it. Again, I don't make the rules, and it was kind of like, well, why wouldn't they just want everybody to like jump? Some of it's a safety thing, some of it's a mechanism thing, and I think some of it's just how they play the game. Like we do this because that's how you play softball, kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of it. Morgan Bruce got called for it once, I believe, later, but
I want to say I saw it in the Iowa game too, at least once.
Yeah,
one of the early Iowa game.
There's one in the 5th in the game that we run ruled them, I believe.
Yeah, that was the one that I was watching.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of. I don't know. It's
just a very strange call, right? Because when it's the kind of like it's kind of like a balk in baseball where it's a very weird play or like a pitching mechanism error or a pitching mechanics error, but it's something like balks are very fluid. Like it's very vague on how you define one. That's why there's an entire like joke about them on Reddit. Like they're almost imperceptible to detect. Whereas this is very clear cut, but I have not seen this called in 2 years now of watching softball pretty regularly. It seems like there's at least to my untrained eye, and your sister can probably tell me if I'm wrong, that there might be a renewed emphasis on the illegal pitches and then also the batter's box rules this year. I don't know if that was previously abused by other teams, but it seems like there might be a renewed emphasis on it.
All right. So Google had a new 2020 softball pitching rules suggestion as soon as I went to look for it, if that makes sense. No, do not play a video. There we go. Wow, looks like a lengthy bulleted list here. Just clicking around through here.
Are they just suggestions, or are they suggestions or accepted suggestions?
I'll put it like this: the NCAA has a PDF on their website titled 2020 and 2021 Major Rule Changes for Softball.
Oh, okay. So they were accepted. Okay, cool. This is official.
Yeah. Prohibits attachments from being added to the foul side of the foul pole. Huh. That's
interesting.
Random. Like the Cubs have flags on their foul pole. That's weird. Require visible undergarments contrast with the color of the ball.
Okay, get to the juicy parts. Just Command F. Come on here.
Barrel compression testing. Oh, that's interesting.
Focus.
Okay, artificial noisemakers. Interesting.
Oh, is no more cowbell. Womp womp.
Yeah, well, see, no, in the dugouts.
That's lame.
Apparently they've been using artificial noisemakers, musical instruments, air horns, and amps by student athletes and team personnel. Because that's whack.
Man, the Falcons' influence really stretches everywhere, doesn't it?
Yep. The offensive team must keep all personnel except the base coaches, batter, base runners, and on-deck batter in the dugout while the ball is live. Was that not a rule already? Oh, here's the pitching ones. 10.1.1 and 10.2.1. The pitcher is considered to be in the pitching position when she has her hands apart, her pivot foot in the underline is a new addition. Her pivot foot in contact with the pitcher's plate, both feet on the ground within the 24-inch length of the pitcher's plate, the hips in line with first and third bases. They struck out stepping forward and having both feet on the pitcher's plate, and the catcher in the position to pitch. All right, and then the other rule change is that both feet must be on the ground in contact with the pitcher's plate. And they added the stride of the foot may be on or behind the pitcher's plate as far back as desired. Once the pitcher initially sets the toe over stride foot, she may not step back any farther to increase the distance. So basically what they did is you can, instead of starting with 2 feet on the mound, or 2 feet on the rubber, you can start with your foot back. And the rationale is to, because it's hard to see if the stride foot is actually in contact with the pitcher's plate There's no advantage to doing that as long as they're not allowed to step farther back during the start of the pitch, and will provide better balance and take account their variances in sizes and strengths without creating unfair advantage.
So it looks like that as a side effect is causing this increased emphasis on the illegal pitch rule.
Yes.
Okay. That at least has a logical end. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and it seems like this is actually a rule that de-legislates it a little bit, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, because what they're allowing is it totally makes sense. They're allowing the pitcher to take a step back because it doesn't. They're allowing the pitcher to put their plant foot back behind the plate because it doesn't affect how much power they can generate in their throwing motion.
Yeah.
So they're saying, okay, this is a more comfortable. Like, we realize this is a more comfortable way for you to throw without being advantageous or creating an unfair advantage, which I guess is what advantageous means. So we're going to allow it anyway. So it all has but at the same time, because now you're looking for the plant foot, you're looking for that back plant foot and making sure it's in place correctly. You also spend more time looking at where that front foot lands, and if it lands in that strip.
Yeah, and I'll add something interesting that is kind of a related rule. I don't think this is what they were calling on Saturday or Friday. They also added that in the pitching position, which is kind of what they defined about the stepping back and taking the signal, the pitcher has to take or appear to take a signal, not necessarily from the catcher. This is interesting to me because something we saw, and again, probably the most notable instance I can think of a quick pitch is Johnny Cueto to Javi Baez in Game 1 of the 2016 NLDS, game that was decided 1-0 because Javi Baez immediately steps in and hits a home run. So obviously it doesn't always work, but softball has had like a big rash of quick pitching last year, and that is definitely not ideal. Like it's a short mound. It's coming at you fast. So basically they're trying to legislate more. It's kind of like you take away that advantage, but you give them this other, you can put your plant foot back and kind of get that better balance. So I guess it's not all coming up pitchers, and like, I don't think it'll eliminate the offensive power of the game, which is kind of one thing that, like, doing something that's going to benefit a pitcher, that's always the immediate concern, right? Like, are people going to watch the game?
I don't think it's going to affect the offensive output of a game at all, because it's the same motion. Sure, the quick pitches are annoying, but anything, it should improve offensive power. What they've stated pretty explicitly, and we should totally move on after this because now we're turning into a softball rules podcast. But what they're saying in that rule book explicitly is this position, this like editing of the motion to where the plant foot is behind the plate, is not advantageous to the pitching motion. It doesn't help you generate any more power. So we're just going to let you do it because it doesn't make any difference. I don't know how they determine this scientifically, and so I can't necessarily comment on the validity, but it's right there.
So yeah, I agree. Bring it back to tech softball. I do want to hit two of my bullet points. Lexi Ray and Blake Nillman looked way better these times out. Pitching, that's good. Those are things we need to come along.
I mean, not playing the number one team in the nation helps.
Yes. And then at the plate, Cameron Stamford, great, reliable veteran presence. Her double on Saturday afternoon sounded fantastic. It's good to hear them hitting the ball hard. And I guess between her and Emma Koff, no one else is doing it better. And I don't know how Nebraska let a girl from Lincoln slip away when she was their state's player of the year, but Emma Koff is a revelation. again, if
very, very, very good. And
They
she can
will-
play multiple positions too. She was not behind the plate on in that the first Iowa game. She was in left field if the ESPN graphics were to be believed.
No, she can confirm. Mora was behind the plate, but yes. Bringing us to the other diamond sport. Let's talk baseball.
Oh boy! All right, let's dive into it. I have my notes here somewhere. So, baseball opening weekend was last weekend. They went 2-1. So they beat St. Peter's 6-0. They beat Cincinnati 6-4, and then got blown out by St. John's 11-1. Bit of a mixed bag. So the St. Peter's game is not super reflective of the opponents that we're going to face this season. St. Peter's only won 5 games in 2019. So let's step beyond that for now. Let's talk about the weekend as a whole. At least those last 2 games. What did you see that stuck out to you?
First, the youth movement is probably the biggest thing that we're kind of going to have to wrap our heads around. I kept scorecards, at St. Peter's and Cincinnati, so those are kind of the ones I'm going to lean off of, but I was at all 3 games, just had to leave St. John's early, and I will say 9 innings, 4 to Maxwell, 2 to Smith, 2 to Westbrooks, and 1 to King of shutout ball, 6 walks on the day with 12 strikeouts, and only 2 hits scattered through the 9 innings. I liked what I saw from the freshman pitchers. That's probably freshman youth movement takeaway number 1 in that game. Compton, in his first at bat as a freshman, boinked one off the right field foul pole, and this despite the guy throwing not eephus pitches, but underhand, that wacky, slow stuff that you don't really, not that you don't plan for it because that sounds bad, but you don't see a lot of it, So that's the freshman, definitely big takeaway. Pitching, they look good on the mound. Definitely have some work still cut out at the plate. And I think that probably goes for basically everyone that's not like Goldberg and Waddell at this point. But
I think we knew that coming in too. Like this is what, at least at the plate, that's sort of what we expected. We knew that you're missing a bit of power, and then you're also missing a bit of hitting consistency because you lose Kyle McCann with the power and then Tristan English with the hitting consistency. So you need to find that somewhere. And I think last week we sort of agreed you got to let the games play out. You got to have, I think it's like your 30 or 40 at bats for those for all of your metrics to stabilize. And I think what we saw this week or this weekend is concerning in a way, but at the same time we have to take it with that grain of salt, right? These stats have not stabilized whatsoever.
I will interject that it's not something I foresaw that Radcliffe and Colin Hall were going to be our 2 biggest offensive black holes, which is problematic with them in the 3 and 4 spots. But if Radcliffe's 1 hit so far this year, scorched triple, so I'm not going to worry about him too much yet. And his speed on the base pads, and this another great takeaway, running. They have been aggressive on the base pads. And kind of complementing that, Holland has looked well in the behind the dish, throwing people out, if not at the plate yet. But aggressive on the base pads. It's kind of hard to like not be in the mode of like doing the scorecard and kind of going back to what I was talking about. Webb definitely looked better. I think our bats, kind of as ironic as this sounds, look better against Cincinnati than they did against St. Peter's and obviously St. It's kind of interesting because, you'd think the team that only won 5 games, you'd be like, all right, time to feast. Mr. Underhand sidearm man.
Was that Koncevich?
It's hard dating that, What?
Was that Koncevich that in that first game that you're referring to?
Yeah, Koncevich, 4.2 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, 4 earned.
Yeah,
Like, obviously, it scored off of him, but it's just weird.
Yeah, and I think also part of that is sort of knocking the rust off, right? You see a more composed, a more aggressive offensive approach in that second game, and also a more composed pitching performance in a couple ways too from Hughes and Archer in that second game. That first game, you throw out all the young arms, and then in the second game, you let two of the elder statesmen in the pitching staff take over.
Yeah, and Archer looked good. Those 2 runs or 3 runs in the 8th. Not that all of them were unearned, because he did let up a ground rule double and a single, and those were hard hit. But it came down more to the error than that started off, and then hitting him with a pitch. Like, obviously it's not great to give up 3 runs, but man, coming back off injury in the first outing back, had 7 strikeouts across 17 batters faced. So that is not bad.
And he hasn't played a competitive game in 2 years. Like, Wiley was touting the stat on the broadcast. Well, 2 years is a stretch, but it was something like 631 days he hadn't played a game, and this is his first action. For that being his first action, we can go over his line here: 4 innings, 2 hits, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, 2 walks, 7 Ks, and all of that in 17 batters faced. That's pretty good. Like, I'm going to complain a little bit about the walks, but for the most part, that is probably what you want out of a long relief stint. And he fulfilled. He is going to be a long relief guy for Georgia Tech this season, or at least that one, either or in the back part of that pen as we get into late game situations. And this is the sort of performance that you want to see, or at least what you want as a starting off point for the season.
Yeah, and I got, not that I'm a doubter, would never doubt you, Andy Archer, but in the 8th I got nervous, but then he comes back out in the 9th, 1, 2, 3 strikeouts. The second one looking, clearly he still had what it took.
Comes back with a vengeance, and it's going to be really fun to see how that develops. I think that's an interesting storyline to keep track of this season, how the bullpen regains its consistency or finds consistency after with Archer now being that centerpiece.
Yeah, and they heard it here first. Dalton Smith, I think he's going to be good. He looked really good live.
All right, so we can talk about the St. John's game, but I think both of us are over it. It's a more realistic, like I said, it's more realistic to the teams that Tech will face this season compared to St. Peter's, but yikes, this was not fun.
We don't have to beat dead horses, or we don't have to sound alarms or anything like that. Florida State lost to Niagara to start the season. They're not doomed. We lost to St. John's, probably the second best team we played yet. It's not great, but
it's game 3. It's game 3 out of like 50 something. It all works out. Like, teams have these kinds of losses. I'm not concerned. Florida State went back the next day and beat Niagara 24-4. Stuff happens.
You win 2 out of 3 from here until June, and you're playing in Omaha for those last 3. So,
yep, that would be fun. I would like that personally.
Yeah, I would too. Olympic trials here too.
Ooh, that would be a good. Don't tease me like that. That would be an amazing trip to Omaha, and Omaha is Omaha.
I've been there. Went to a College World Series. Of course, that was when I was in middle school. But yeah, you got any overarching thoughts on baseball? You gonna call anybody as being a king? Or you gonna leave it back up?
am gonna play the sample size card here. I want 2 weeks of games in before I say anything. Before I say anything semi-definitive, I want to see some of these numbers stabilize, and see what we're playing with, because, like you said, you're looking at the consistent hitters from last year, like Waddell and Goldberg being back, but then you're also seeing what looks like serious regression after like 12 at bats total from Radcliffe and Hall. So sample size. We'll talk to me in 2 weeks.
All right, will do.
All right, let's wrap up with a couple of quick hitters before we get into our last major topic. Club sports hockey went 1 win and 1 draw this week. I think the win was versus Liberty, and the draw was also versus Liberty, if I read the article right. Lacrosse dumpstered both of the teams that they played. I don't even think it's worth mentioning who they played. It was that bad. And they are looking very good. That is, as per usual, that is your tournament team, nationally ranked Georgia Tech club lacrosse team. So we'll see how that one works out at the end of the season. All right, let's get into the weirdest discussion to close off. Georgia Tech men's basketball beat number 5, number 4 Louisville
5
this week. Okay, well, top 5 Louisville. What happened? I'm still very confused.
That was a not to say it was a bad game. That was an ugly game.
Yeah,
in an interesting way. There was the whole Blarge thing. That was whack.
That was weird.
The Tech being in the double bonus with 10, 11 to play in the second half. That was weird. It was just a strange game. I think Georgia Tech prides itself on winning strange games. I will say that. Like this is the second of them. I will say that I think we've won this season. There's been a lot of strange. This is the strange king of the strange season. Obviously a very good win in terms of like the prestige of it or whatever.
No court storming, though. No court storming, which, as someone that was a student and didn't get to experience that, I fully resent today's student body for.
Dude, I was right there. I really wanted to, but sadly not. What was I going on about? No, I guess, I don't know. It's kind of been a theme of trying to watch basketball this year, that it's not really been that fun with how it's been official. I feel like every game I go, man, what is with these calls? And I don't know, like when it's not Georgia Tech, it leads me to believe that I can't be the only one wondering that, but it's definitely most apparent when I'm watching games I'm most invested in. And I think a lot of the weirdness went both ways. So I'm not going to just chalk that up to being oh man, they called this weird thing at Georgia, blah, blah, so we're winner kind of thing. Because I bet both teams when we lose. But it was just, it was just weird.
It was strange. Just to go over some of the high-level statistics from the box score here, Louisville only made like 1 of 8 or like 2 of 16 3-pointers, something like that. They shot 12.5% from 3. Tech, for one of the few times this season, won the battle at the charity stripe with 71% versus Louisville's 70%. Overall, Tech shot, if you're looking at true shooting percentage, Tech shot about 11 percentage points better than Louisville. Tech did again lose the turnover battle. I had 2 more turnovers than Louisville, but I think in that also goes back to what you're saying, in that this was an evenly called game. I mean, our turnover numbers here include, and I didn't split them out, so this is my fault when I was putting together box score, but they include both dead ball and live ball turnovers. So if you're counting fouls in there, that's still pretty even. I mean, plus or minus 2, sure, but that's still a fairly evenly called game.
Yeah, I will say part of the weirdness isn't down to the officiating too. I don't think Louisville. Granted, I've only watched them play like 2 or 3 other games here, but I wouldn't really say that they are the most polished team on the planet. It felt a lot like they were not just chucking balls up, because that's not fair to them. But you watch Georgia Tech play, and sometimes you're like, oh, they're fast and loose. They're not making that dunk, that layup, or
It's not
taking advantage where they could. It's not crisp. A lot of Tech plays, and I wouldn't say Louisville played a very crisp game either. Tech is used to turning over the ball a lot, and if we're even in the ballpark of a similar turnover margin, we're going to be in that ball game, and that's obviously what happened last week.
Yeah, and I guess this comes with it's just a weird game, and I think a part of this is also you have to consider that Jordan Nwora versus Georgia Tech was completely shut down. I think he only had 2 points. Think he only had 2 points, and this is a guy that averages something around 20 per game for the season. And then this win also comes with a similar caveat that Clemson went ahead and did the same dang thing to Louisville yesterday. So this is just a weird swoon for a Louisville team that has looked pretty good for the majority of the season. And I think there was a lot of talk about Jordan Nwora winning ACC Player of the Year, but he's been absolutely silenced by 2 teams that, and I will say this with full respect to both Georgia Tech and Clemson, they're in the, like, even by ranking standards, let's put that scientifically, like, they're in the bottom half of the conference right now. These are teams that, and I hate to say it, Louisville should be winning these games and improving their tournament stock, and right now they just dropped both of them in consecutive days. It's weird to watch, and both games ended up playing out the exact same way. Like Georgia Tech and Clemson shot the ball better than Louisville, and Louisville tried to turn it into a little bit of a street fight with a lot of turnovers and a lot of not dirty play, but just not crisp, like you're saying, not crisp play, and it just worked out in a home team's favor both times.
To an extent, it's very hard to go on the road and win in the ACC. Yeah, that is true. That will always be true.
But at the same time, it's like the number 5 team in the country.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's not possible to be a number 5 team to go into 2/3 full McCamish Pavilion on a weekday night. Like, that is not.
And that's not a slight against us, right? That's not a slight against the fans that are at McCamish Pavilion. But even in this weird of a year in college basketball, there is a certain amount of, I don't know, prestige or respect we give to a top 10 or a top 5 opponent, right?
Yep.
We expect a certain level of performance game in and game out. And sure, you can pull the old, like, what people do in baseball. It's like, oh, anyone can win in a given day. And we've said that today on this podcast itself. But it just, like, there's so much smaller of a sample size in basketball, like pro and college, than there is in baseball. And that greatness, like the true talent of a team, can really take advantage of that small sample size and dumpster like lower quality teams. And if you take a very not so rigorous statistical approach, Louisville probably should have won both of these games. Margin aside, they should have won at least, and they didn't. Yeah. And that is a testament to the quality of both Clemson and Georgia Tech and the way that they played this season, because Clemson has had some good wins this season too. But
yep, they're at the same place we're at.
I think both of us are just at the same state where we're just like, what happened? Like, this is supposed to be a good ACC contending Louisville team that just got their power sucked away by the Monstars, seemingly.
Yeah. Hopefully it happens to the other Louisville team this week when the women's team plays them.
All right. I think we've done the exasperated college basketball fan in 2020 meme to death at this point over the last 10 minutes. All right, let's go into the weekend pre-cap. What are we looking for this week in Georgia Tech sports?
Brief shout out. Right now is men's golf. They're in first out in Puerto Rico, third in the country. They lead number 2 Oklahoma by a stroke after Monday's play. Tuesday, I don't think this goes out till Wednesday, so we'll just skip right to Wednesday. Women's swim and dive at ACC Championships. That'll go through Saturday. Softball's at Georgia State at 5. Men's basketball's at Wake Forest 7. Women's basketball hosts Louisville at 6 p.m. on Thursday. Softball heads to Birmingham Friday to play DePaul, Kentucky, and Samford. Women's tennis hosts Virginia 4 p.m. Ken Byers on Friday, while men's tennis same time is at Tennessee and Knoxville. Baseball will host Ohio State on my YJR. By the time it says 2 p.m., it's actually 4 p.m., and that'll be 4-2-1, the traditional home weekend series times against Ohio State. Then Saturday, you got more baseball and softball. Men's basketball plays up at Syracuse. And then on Sunday, women's tennis is at Boston College and Chestnut Hill. That's a must-win. Men's tennis hosts Miami at noon. Baseball and softball round out the slate before women's basketball is going to be not at 2 p.m. on a Sunday. Wacky, I know. They have the 4 p.m. slot on ACC Network. Kind of surprised they didn't get a home closing, I guess. To close out their home slate, I'm surprised they didn't get the actual nighttime game because I don't think they've had one of those on the weekend at home yet. But they play Florida State. They're pretty good. They're playing for K that day, so they'll be raising proceeds for research. So good for them. And then in terms of schedule, that pretty much rounds it out. Stay tuned for some more club news. Lax should be back in action. Hockey's regional tournaments coming up, and then club swim will be in Gainesville, Florida for that meet. Off the top of my head, I think rugby plays too. So busy week.
Just, I guess, a quick preview because we are very much so over time. If my clock here is correct. Quick previews.
Softball going to Alabama. Birmingham, Samford. They play Samford twice, I believe. Kentucky twice and DePaul once. Seems like we play DePaul every year, which is kind of random. Kentucky's a top 20 team. Banking one of those two games would be great. DePaul and Samford, we're under 500. It would be nice to come back from Alabama, one game above 500, go 4-1 on the weekend. But I know that is a bold thing to ask from anyone. So I'll set my expectation at 3-2, and then hopefully we bank a win against Georgia State coming up during the week, which would put us at 4.
I'll interject here with a brief preview of Ohio State. Ohio State is Big Ten. The Big Ten is not a great basketball conference other than the creme de la creme. So we're talking Michigan. I think that's about it. So Ohio State, they did win the Big Ten tournament last year and made the NCAA tournament, but then they kind of crapped out. So 2-1 is the expectation. Hopefully that works out.
Yeah. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, Akshay.
Yeah. Men's basketball, who knows? Women's basketball, it's a rough stretch. I don't think either of us would be well served as to predicting those because we will probably be wrong on both accounts. I think that about rounds it up. Any last final thoughts?
No. Happy President's Day, belated to them. That's about it.
Cool. So, with that being said, we will see you next Tuesday or whenever we get a chance to record. I don't know. Time is weird. Peace out.